The nice guy will sabotage everything for the absolute condition that what feeds that motivation for his affections towards another is starved. So aggressively starved, in fact, so aggressively rejected that it is painful. Painful to experience, yes, but also painful to watch, because then watching this guy slowly try to reorient himself in the smoke of this explosive rejection, it's like watching someone set themselves on fire. Because the genuine sorrow and empathy I feel watching this, it's so apparent. But honestly, I would rather jump off the next convenient cliff than get near you. Hi everyone. So I'm going to be very careful with how I articulate myself in this analysis. It has come to my attention that there is a lot of severe insecurity, the kind that often manifests as dishonesty, when it comes to the identifiable extreme characters in the modern social market. I'm obviously referencing the baddie, the manic pixie, the bad boy, and I haven't analyzed all of them, but I've given a lot of thought as to why they are so painfully divisive. Because I think when there is some implicit insecurity, you are bound to touch on somebody's nerves. The nice guy is one of the personas whose story represented in media tends to be accurate only up until the very end. And I mean the very end. Because what comes of nice guys in real life tends to be a little bit more unfortunate. Even if they happen not to finish last, they are seldom prepared for the consequences of finishing first. For that reason, I'm going to discuss some of the possible insecurities, fears, motivations, and possible benefits of being the nice guy. Like I said in the beginning, I want to be very, very careful with how I do this because unlike baddies or manic pixies, as I discussed in previous videos, they aren't exceptional. And in their most extreme representations, when, for example, their niceness hasn't spawned them the romantic ideal they've been, looking for, they tend to spawn these mob-like movements that might look at an opinion like mine or someone like me and go like, enemy number one, So again, I do try to be sensitive, but we'll see how it goes. I would tell you not to get too upset with me when it comes to this very subjective analysis, but as we know, that never works when it comes to the internet. So instead, I'll tell you to get yourself a snack, get yourself some tea, get yourself comfortable, and let's just have a chat. Without further ado, let's begin. So, one particular disdain of mine I've made very explicit on this channel is my extreme dislike for pick-me. So what is pick-me? So if you don't know what a pick-me is an aggressive emotional panderer, often to the sympathies and struggles of the opposite sex with such embarrassing compromise to their own self-regard that it's actually quite nauseating to watch. Within the narrative of film and television, they tend to be perpetually stuck in the friend zone, right? They befriend the subject of their affection and navigate a tense dynamic of push and pull as the subject invites them in, only as close as romance might tease to be, but then dies a very violent death before anyone can get excited about it. I think we've all seen this kind of play out. And who kills that possibility for romance, might you ask? Well, it's the rival. See, the nice guy will always have a nemesis in this story. Something or someone competing for the affections of whoever it is that they happen to be interested in, right? It could be another romantic interest, it could be his unfortunate foil who happens to be better and more attractive than the nice guy in every way. It could be a distraction, like an obsessive pursuit of interest that the subject of his affection refuses to look past or give the nice guy any time of day because they're just so focused on that one thing of that. Or it could be the nice guy himself. Let me explain. So reading has and always will be my first love, and when I started reading the classics, I noticed that for every ideal, that is, for every lure to the subject of the nice guy's affections, exclusionary to himself, had a mirror personality to distinguish it from any other ideal. Let me be a little bit more clear. So what I'm trying to say is that the hero, if not facing a personified villain, needed a mousy sidekick, right? The villain arc needed this pathetic little minion, And both the sidekick and the minion needed to be presented as equally imbecilic, at least contrasted against the hero/villain, because for every shortcoming, the hero/villain not merely colored in for the gaps of incompetency, not merely exceeded expectations in pretentious badass fashion, but to keep up with my weird little metaphor, set the entire coloring book on fire and rid the sidekick/minion of any potential opportunity to outwit him, to best him, to be better. You get what I'm saying, right? You're second in command, but no one really respects you. And the ideal will forever mock you for the fact that you will never get there. It's a pretty sad place to be. So today we're gonna look at one of my favorite classics. So when we look at Arthurian legend, we witness Guinevere torn between duty and desire. She's stuck in this love triangle between King Arthur and Lancelot. In the context of the nice guy persona situation that I just described, Guinevere represents the subject of affection or desire that the nice guy might feel entitled to due to his perceived virtues. Within every story, classic or otherwise, I see the nice guy as a shadow, an entity of sorts that could attach to either competing guy's personality, depending on how he chooses to navigate himself in this romantic context. So Lancelot is this chivalrous knight. He's known for his bravery and his loyalty. He shares this deep, albeit forbidden love with Guinevere, and Lancelot's character can be seen analogous to the nice guy who believes that being kind, being chivalrous, being devoted should guarantee romantic attention. However, his love for Guinevere often comes with a sense of entitlement, blurring the lines between genuine kindness and expecting reciprocation. King Arthur, the legendary king and leader, represents societal expectations, responsibilities, and established order. In the nice guy analysis, King Arthur may symbolize societal norms and structures that the nice guy adheres to, right? Expecting that his adherence to these norms, especially on the grounds of high status and wealth, should earn him romantic attention. This story, guys, if you couldn't tell, is really one of my favorites because it's so fascinating, at least, for me, to see how this shadow, this entity of the nice guy, who, by the way, I do believe is a villain, teases both of these characters, Sir Lancelot and King Arthur, to some form of villainy. It is my theory that the nice guy is some kind of inoperative, dormant villain, and I'm going to set out to prove it to you, not just in the story, but in real life romantic dynamics. Alright, so the Arthurian legend itself has various versions and the endings can differ. Lancelot, often portrayed as the quintessential knight, harbors a genuine affection for Guinevere. His love for her is completely unattainable due to her marriage to King Arthur, so basically she rejects him, and Lancelot's unrequited love may initially cast the shadow onto him, right? The nice guy might, on the surface, attach to him, because this is akin to the nice guy who feels entitled to affection due to his perceived virtues. He's the knight, He is the good, the strong, the honorable, the moral, virtuous knight who should, get the fairest maiden of all the land. So when Guinevere rejects him for, his best friend, the king, it seems that, okay, he was too much of a nice guy, so he finished last. But I don't think that's the case. I think it's all a distraction. I think it's all a smokescreen, and let me tell you why. Remember how I said in the beginning that all of these archetypes have some severe savor of insecurity? Lancelot is, of course, heartbroken, but take crucial note that Lancelot does not self-combust, right? For lack of a better term, he doesn't completely lose himself in his heartbreak. King Arthur, on the other hand, embodies the insecurity that arises when societal expectations, represented by his kingship and marriage to Guinevere, don't guarantee personal happiness. Essentially, King Arthur's mental health, like a lot of men we see today, has always been very, very fragile, and like most men, unfortunately, he burdens it on the romantic ideal to fix that. So that's what Arthur does, essentially. He burdens his happiness on Guinevere. He expects her to fix something dark and despairing and nihilistic within him, and she does not do that. In fact, she does the opposite. She doesn't fix it. She does one better. She basically sets it on fire. As Arthur becomes more and more unstable within the context of Camelot's politics and his insecure dynamic with Guinevere, he is suspicious of her, but he is also dishonest in his vulnerability with her. Guinevere has an affair with Sir Lancelot, who very conveniently happens to be placed in the mirror frame in contrast to the king, because remember, he is Camelot's main knight, but he's also King Arthur's best friend. So the supposed sidekick, right? Just below the status of the king, but not quite adjacent to him. I hope you're staying with me because the unraveling gets so much darker. Mordred is King Arthur's illegitimate son. Yes, Guinevere does fall pregnant with Lancelot's child, but because she's technically the queen, she is part of the bloodline, and Mordred has some claim to royal identity within Camelot by fault. But that claim, you see, the legalities, they're complicated. It's not a secure claim, but it is a valid claim. In fact, it's almost as complicated as the depth of King Arthur's own insecurity. If we consider Arthur as the nice guy, Mordred embodies the shadow side of that persona, the resentment, the betrayal, and the desire for retribution. Why? Because he will eventually destroy his own father and bring Camelot down with the crown. What damns the nice guy is that in his severe insecurity, he just cannot help but slowly and surely villainize the object of his affections for every behavior of hers that does not support what he feels his niceness deserves. She isn't reciprocating the way she should, and if he'd picked a less shallow partner, maybe she would have stuck with him through it. But no, he picked terribly. Like most men in these narratives, he fell for a superficially addicted manic pixie. Remember, Guinevere married Lancelot for his status, for his wealth, for his promise of protection, and left him for the same loss. Once Camelot began to crumble in the hands of Arthur's deteriorating mental health and all the mess of the politics that he just could not get a grasp on, Guinevere, in typical manic pixie fashion, hopped on to the next superficial guarantee of security. She hopped onto the knight. Arthur, truly, in this story, he was the real nice guy because he couldn't help but both burden her with expectation and villainize her. And in that insecurity, probably force out the villain within her. The nice guy will sabotage everything for the absolute condition that what feeds that motivation for his affections towards another is starved. So aggressively starved, in fact, so aggressively rejected that it is painful. Painful to experience, yes, but also painful to watch, because then watching this guy slowly try to reorient himself in the smoke of this explosive rejection, it's like watching someone set themselves on fire. Because the genuine sorrow and empathy I feel watching this, it's so apparent. But honestly, I would rather jump off the next convenient cliff than get near you. And that is what the affair did to Arthur. But honestly, even before Guinevere, I think he'd already made concrete his own doom when he thought he could bury his own insecurity with having a queen. Because see, if Lancelot were the nice guy, the harsh rejection of Guinevere marrying Arthur would have done what the similarly harsh rejection of her affair did to Arthur. It would have destroyed him. It would have brought out the villain within him. And it would have exposed a corruption that eventually led to the kingdom's downfall. But no, Lancelot thrived. Lancelot he lived his life. And at the end of the day, he won not because he got Guinevere. And honestly, if that's the only part of this story that you are getting, I think you've missed the entire point. And you are myopically addicted to this childlike game of who gets the girl. Lancelot kept his honor, which many men don't in the aftermath of events similar to this. Even in recognizing the harm of his role in this affair, Lancelot is depicted in many versions, not all of them, but in my favorite ones, as seeking severe penance for his role in the affair with Guinevere and the subsequent fall of Camelot, preceded by his then efforts to rebuild it. This penance often involves acts of chivalry, prayer, and other forms of atonement, and he also seeks reconciliation with Arthur. The nice guy will excuse any immorality for as long as it brings him what he feels his niceness deserves. He makes himself the moral arbiter, judge, jury, and executioner of everything because his arrogance damns him to believe that he's the only one seeing things clearly, logically. I'm sure you've met people like that. I have too, but you know, they're human and they've been some of my dearest friends. But they're also so severely blinded by their own insecurity that they wouldn't dare look in the face. I've said it so many times in previous videos, you guys, obsession with artificiality is cancerous. Guinevere could only think about what a man could give her in the context of status, security, and wealth. Arthur could only think about how a woman of beauty and esteem could make him whole. And let's be honest, make him look good to the rest of the kingdoms, to the rest of the round table, to all of his friends, you know? Lancelot, briefly, in a tragic moment of misstep, fell to that same lure in partaking within that affair he had with Guinevere. But the difference is he had been consistently clear-minded from the start to be able to snap out of it and realize that what he'd done was fundamentally wrong. He had slept with a married woman. He'd betrayed his best friend. Everyone would suffer the consequences for this. The nice guy needs to finish last because even if he does finish first, it's not a real win. Because really, if Lancelot was able to thrive in silence and ascend to second in command because he didn't let some girl's non-reciprocation eat him alive, I'd say he was overqualified to be in the race in the first place. And any guy can do the same. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this little dissection. Please let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. But I will see you next time.